My name is Margaret Wilson, and at 67 years old, I never thought my own daughter would betray me. For decades, I collected jewelry that told the story of my life, family heirlooms, anniversary gifts from my late husband Richard, and treasured pieces from my own mother. When Stephanie moved back home after her divorce, I welcomed her with open arms. Little did I know she had other plans for my precious memories. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from those we trust the most. If you've ever had your trust broken by family, you'll understand what happened next. While I share my story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and subscribe if family stories like mine resonate with you. Retirement had been kind to me. After losing Richard 5 years ago to a sudden heart attack, I settled into a quiet routine in our family home. The 3-bedroom craftsman-style house in a peaceful suburban neighborhood had been our dream when we purchased it 35 years ago. Now it felt both comforting and occasionally too spacious for just me. The garden Richard had lovingly tended still flourished under my less experienced care, and photographs of our life together adorned every wall. My jewelry collection was modest by some standards but priceless to me. Each piece carried memories far more valuable than their monetary worth. The engagement ring Richard proposed with in 1978 at the Christmas tree lighting downtown. The pearl necklace my mother received from my father when he returned from military service in 1945. My grandmother's antique brooch with tiny sapphires that had crossed the Atlantic with her from Ireland in 1912. The diamond earrings Richard surprised me with on our 25th anniversary. The charm bracelet that grew with each milestone in our lives together. I kept most pieces in my bedroom jewelry box, with the more valuable items in a small safe hidden in the back of my closet. I never considered myself wealthy, but as a retired elementary school teacher with a decent pension and Richard's life insurance, I lived comfortably without financial worries. When Stephanie called in tears last January, explaining that her 15-year marriage to Michael was ending, and she couldn't afford to keep their house, my response was immediate. Come home, sweetheart. Bring the kids. We'll figure it out together. At 52, Stephanie had built a career as a dental office manager, but the divorce had devastated her finances. Her children, Jason and Emma, were 16 and 14, good kids navigating the difficult terrain of adolescence made more complicated by their parents' separation. Those first few weeks were a whirlwind of adjustments. I moved my craft supplies from the guest bedroom to make space for Emma, while Jason took the converted office in the basement. Stephanie reclaimed her childhood bedroom, now painted a mature sage green instead of the pink she'd grown up with. We established new routines around bathroom schedules, meal preparations, and household responsibilities. Mom, I can't thank you enough, Stephanie said repeatedly during those early days, often with tears in her eyes. I'll get back on my feet soon, I promise. Take your time, I assured her. Family supports family. Your dad would want me to help you through this. I covered the increased grocery bills without complaint, drove the kids to activities when Stephanie worked late, and even contributed to Emma's braces payment when insurance covered less than expected. My retirement savings were healthy enough to absorb these expenses, and nothing made me happier than seeing my grandchildren at the breakfast table each morning. The first hint of financial tension arrived about 3 months into our new arrangement. Stephanie had received the final divorce settlement, which included child support but no alimony. It's just not fair, she fumed one evening after the kids had gone to bed. 20 years I gave that man, and now I have to start over at my age. You'll rebuild, I said, patting her hand across the kitchen table. You're smart and capable. She sighed heavily. But will I ever have security again? A house of my own? Retirement savings? Michael got to keep his pension plan intact. I poured her another glass of wine. You have time, and you're welcome here as long as you need. Stephanie studied me over the rim of her glass. What about your estate planning, Mom? Have you updated everything since Dad died? The question caught me slightly off guard. I have a will, of course. Richard and I set it up years ago. I haven't changed much, just updated it to remove your father as beneficiary. But have you worked with a financial planner? There are ways to avoid probate and minimize estate taxes, she pressed. You should protect your assets for the next generation. I suppose I could look into it, I conceded, though estate planning hadn't been high on my priority list. My situation seemed straightforward. Everything would go to Stephanie and eventually to my grandchildren. I know someone through work, Stephanie offered quickly. He specializes in estate planning for seniors. I could set up an appointment. I nodded, touched by what I interpreted as concern for my affairs. That would be nice, dear. Looking back, I should have recognized this conversation as the first subtle signal of trouble. But mothers have a remarkable capacity for believing the best about their children, often until evidence to the contrary becomes impossible to ignore. The next morning I found Stephanie at the kitchen table with a legal pad covered in notes. "Just thinking about your future," she explained with a smile that, in hindsight, didn't quite reach her eyes. "We need to make sure everything you've worked for is protected." I kissed the top of her head, as I had done countless times throughout her childhood. "You're a good daughter to worry about your old mom." "You're not old," she protested automatically. Then, after a pause, "But it's smart to plan ahead while you're still active and healthy." Active and healthy. The words would echo back to me later with a very different meaning than I understood that morning. But for now, I simply squeezed her shoulder and went about my day, grateful for my caring daughter who had returned to the family nest. The shift in Stephanie's behavior was so gradual that for weeks I failed to recognize the pattern emerging right under my nose. It began with casual questions sprinkled into our everyday conversations. "Mom, which insurance company covers your jewelry collection?" she asked one evening while helping me put away dishes. "Liberty Mutual, I think. The policy is in the filing cabinet with the home insurance documents." "Why do you ask?" She shrugged nonchalantly. "Just wondering if you're getting a good rate. Insurance costs so much these days." A few days later, "Have you ever had your grandmother's brooch professionally appraised? Antiques like that can be worth serious money." Again, I thought nothing of it, explaining that Richard had arranged appraisals for insurance purposes years ago. Then came the mysterious disappearances. Small items at first. A silver letter opener from my desk, a decorative crystal paperweight, a pair of gold earrings I rarely wore. When I mentioned not being able to find these things, Stephanie was quick with plausible explanations. "Oh, I borrowed the letter opener to open some packages. It's probably still in my room. The kids were dusting for you yesterday. Maybe they moved the paperweight." "Those gold earrings? Weren't you wearing them last week at Aunt Vivian's birthday lunch? Check your other jewelry box." Each explanation seemed reasonable, and I had no reason to doubt her. Yet the items never reappeared, and eventually I stopped asking about them. One afternoon, while sorting through the mail, I came across a glossy catalog from elite jewelry buyers, addressed to Stephanie. Its pages displayed price charts for gold, silver, and precious gems, along with testimonials about generous payments for estate jewelry. Why would my daughter, who owned few valuable pieces herself, be receiving such material? I set it aside on her desk without comment, but the question lingered in my mind. More unsettling was my grandchildren's sudden interest in my jewelry collection. Emma, previously concerned only with teen fashion trends, began asking to see my vintage pieces. She would try them on, photographing herself wearing them, for a school project about fashion through the decades. Jason, typically absorbed in video games and soccer, started commenting on which items looked valuable whenever I opened my jewelry box. "That sapphire ring must be worth thousands, Grandma," he remarked once. "My friend's mom sold a ring like that and bought a car." The comment struck me as odd coming from a 16-year-old boy, but I dismissed it as teenage curiosity about money. One Tuesday morning, I met my longtime friend Elaine Sullivan for our weekly coffee date at Rosewood Cafe. We had taught together at Lincoln Elementary for over 20 years before retiring within months of each other. Now our standing appointment kept us connected through life's changes. "How's it going with the full house?" Elaine asked after we'd settled with our cappuccinos. "Busy but good," I replied. "The kids bring so much energy to the house." Elaine stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "And Stephanie? Is she getting back on her feet?" "Slowly. The divorce really knocked her sideways, financially and emotionally." "I imagine so." Elaine hesitated, then continued in a lower voice. "Margaret, forgive me for asking, but have you established clear financial boundaries? I've seen situations where adult children return home and, well, expectations get muddled." I felt a flicker of defensiveness. "Stephanie's not taking advantage, if that's what you're suggesting." She contributes what she can. Of course she does. Elaine backpedaled slightly. I just remember when my sister Barbara took in her son after his divorce. She ended up co-signing loans and adding him to her accounts. When he couldn't pay, it nearly wiped out her retirement savings. Stephanie would never put me in that position. I insisted, perhaps too quickly. She's always been responsible. Elaine patted my hand. I'm sure you're right. Just be careful with financial entanglements, that's all. Even with family. Especially with family. I changed the subject, slightly annoyed at what I perceived as Elaine's unfair suspicion of my daughter. Yet her words planted a seed of caution that would later prove prescient. The following weekend, Stephanie appeared in my doorway as I was getting ready for a neighborhood garden club meeting. She wore a navy blazer over a crisp white blouse, looking polished and professional. Mom, I hate to ask, but I have a second interview for that office manager position at the medical center tomorrow. Would you mind if I borrowed your pearl necklace? It would look perfect with this outfit, and I want to make a good impression. The request seemed innocuous. Of course, dear. Let me get it for you. I opened my jewelry box and carefully lifted out my mother's pearls, their soft luster unchanged by decades. As I placed them in Stephanie's outstretched hands, I felt a momentary reluctance I couldn't explain. These mean a lot to me, I said unnecessarily. They were Grandma Grace's. I know, Mom. I'll be extra careful with them, Stephanie promised, fastening them around her neck immediately. See? They're perfect. When the necklace wasn't returned to my jewelry box that evening, I told myself not to fuss. Stephanie had probably left it in her room after the interview. But 3 days passed and still the pearls did not reappear. Stephanie, I finally asked over breakfast, do you still have my mother's pearl necklace? A flash of something unreadable crossed her face before she composed her features. Oh, yes, I completely forgot. I'll get them for you right after work today. That evening, she placed the necklace in my hands with profuse apologies. As I returned it to my jewelry box, I noticed immediately that something was wrong. The clasp, which had been solid gold with a distinctive filigree pattern, had been replaced with a simpler, lighter version. Stephanie, I said carefully, what happened to the original clasp? Her explanation came too quickly. It broke when I was taking it off after the interview. I was so upset, Mom. But I took it to a jeweler right away and had it repaired. They couldn't match the old design exactly, but they assured me this gold clasp is actually more secure. I examined the necklace more closely and noticed that several of the pearls appeared slightly different in color and size than I remembered. Could my memory be failing me? Or had more than just the clasp been changed? Well, thank you for getting it fixed, I said, deciding not to press the issue. But that night, I lay awake wondering why the supposed repair had taken 3 days when there was a jewelry repair shop just 10 minutes from our house. And why hadn't she consulted me before replacing the original clasp, which had been part of the necklace's history and value? For the first time, I locked my bedroom door before going to sleep. The action felt both necessary and heartbreaking. Inside me, a battle raged between maternal trust and growing suspicion. I desperately wanted to believe in my daughter's integrity, but the evidence was becoming harder to ignore with each passing day. The moment that shattered my world happened on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon. I had returned early from my weekly volunteer shift at the community library, my arms laden with groceries. The house was quiet as I slipped in through the side door leading to the kitchen. I assumed no one was home. Stephanie would be at work, and the kids still at school. As I placed the grocery bags on the counter, voices drifted down from upstairs, Stephanie's voice, and a man's I didn't recognize. She must have come home early too. Not wanting to interrupt what sounded like a business call, I quietly began unpacking the groceries. Then a phrase cut through the air that froze me mid-motion. A carton of eggs suspended in my hand. We need to sell her jewelry before she notices anything else is missing, Stephanie said, her voice clear despite the distance. The pearl necklace was a close call, but I managed to convince her. The male voice responded too low for me to make out the words. No, she's completely clueless, Stephanie continued with a laugh that sounded nothing like my daughter's usual warm chuckle. The clasps are the easiest to swap out first. The stones can be replaced with cubic zirconia gradually. She never wears most of it anyway. Just keeps it all in that old jewelry box like some kind of shrine. My heart hammered against my ribcage so violently I feared they might hear it upstairs. The egg slipped from my grasp, crashing to the floor in a mess of shells and yolk, but I barely noticed. The most valuable pieces are in a safe in her closet, but I'm working on that, Stephanie continued. She told me the combination once years ago. Something with their anniversary date. I'll figure it out. The male voice again, slightly louder this time. Something about moving timeline and estate plan. Trust me, this is better, Stephanie insisted. If we wait for her to die, everything gets tied up in probate. This way, we convert the assets now when we need them. She doesn't even need this stuff. And technically, it'll all be mine eventually anyway. I stood paralyzed, egg yolk seeping around my shoes, as the conversation shifted to specifics about which items might fetch the best prices. My own daughter was systematically stealing from me, replacing my precious mementos with fakes, planning to sell my memories for cash. My mind flashed back to Stephanie as a 5-year-old, sitting on my lap as I showed her my jewelry box for the first time. This was Grandma's, I had explained, letting her touch the pearl necklace with careful fingers. Someday, when you're grown up, it will be yours to keep and share with your own daughter. When I'm a mommy, she had asked, wide-eyed. Yes, when you're a mommy, but not until I'm a very old grandma myself. The memory twisted like a knife in my chest. Now, 47 years later, she couldn't wait for the proper time of inheritance. She was taking what wasn't yet hers to claim, violating not just my possessions but the sacred trust between mother and daughter. Upstairs, a door opened and footsteps moved across the hallway. I snapped out of my daze and quickly wiped up the broken eggs, disposing of the evidence in the outdoor trash can. Then I slipped back out the side door and walked around the block for 30 minutes, struggling to compose myself before returning home as if for the first time. When I re-entered the house, calling out, "I'm home!" with forced cheerfulness, Stephanie was alone in the kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner. "Hi, Mom," she greeted me normally. "How was the library?" "Fine," I managed, avoiding her eyes as I set down the remaining groceries. "Busy. I think I'll lie down for a bit before dinner." "Are you feeling okay?" Her concern sounded genuine, which somehow made everything worse. "Just a little tired," I lied, already heading for the stairs. In the privacy of my bedroom, I locked the door and went straight to my jewelry box. With trembling hands, I began examining pieces I hadn't worn in months or years. The diamond stud earrings Richard gave me for our 30th anniversary felt lighter than I remembered. The emerald ring from my mother seemed less brilliant. The gold chain necklace that had been my 16th birthday gift from my parents appeared thinner. Were these changes real, or was my mind playing tricks fueled by new suspicion? I couldn't be certain without professional assessment, but my gut told me these were not the same pieces I had cherished for decades. I moved to my closet and pushed aside hanging clothes to access the small wall safe hidden behind them. My fingers fumbled with the combination, Richard's birth month and day, followed by our wedding year. The door swung open to reveal my most valuable pieces. Richard's grandmother's diamond brooch, my own mother's engagement ring, the ruby earrings from our 40th anniversary. They appeared untouched, but now I doubted my ability to discern real from fake. As I returned these pieces to the safe, my gaze fell on Stephanie's tablet left charging on my bedside table. She often used it in my room where the reading light was better, she claimed. A new terrible thought occurred to me. With only slight hesitation, I picked it up. The screen illuminated without requiring a password. The browser history confirmed my worst fears. Best prices for estate jewelry. How to identify antique jewelry values. Replacing diamonds with cubic zirconia. Online jewelry buyers, no questions asked. Dozens of searches over the past several weeks, along with visited websites of pawn shops and jewelry buyers. In her email account, which synced automatically to the tablet, I found messages to someone named Victor Lawrence with photos of my pearl necklace, diamond earrings, and several other pieces. "Client has these available," the message read, as if Stephanie were a dealer rather than a thief, willing to separate pearls from clasp if that brings better value. I set down the tablet, my whole body shaking. Then I remembered the shared family computer downstairs. Still alone in my room, I used my phone to remotely access its browsing history using the family account. There I found even more evidence. Printouts of appraisal forms, comparison pricing for various gems, and a disturbing search for how to access elderly parent finances legally. Elderly. The word stung almost as much as the betrayal itself. I was 67, independent, clear-minded, and in good health. Yet in Stephanie's narrative, I had become an elderly parent to be managed and divested of assets. I sat on the edge of my bed, tears finally breaking through the shock. How had my daughter, whom I had raised with values of honesty and integrity, come to see me as nothing more than a source of financial assets to be harvested? What had happened to the loving child who once made me handmade Mother's Day cards promising eternal love and gratitude? When my tears subsided, I washed my face and went downstairs. I needed to act normal while figuring out my next steps. I couldn't confront Stephanie yet, not until I had protected what remained of my possessions and documented what was already gone. Feeling better? Stephanie asked as I entered the kitchen. Dinner preparations continued as if this were any normal evening, as if she hadn't been plotting against me hours earlier. Much better, I lied, accepting the glass of water she offered. What can I help with for dinner? Everything's under control, she assured me with a smile I once would have found comforting. Oh, I meant to ask you, do you still have Grandma's sapphire brooch? Emma's school is having a vintage fashion show fundraiser, and it would be perfect with her outfit. The casual request, coming just hours after I'd overheard her plans, nearly broke my composure. I think that piece is too valuable for a school event, I said carefully. The clasp is delicate, but I might have a costume piece that would work just as well. A flash of disappointment crossed her face before she nodded. You're probably right. We wouldn't want anything to happen to a family heirloom. The irony of her statement might have made me laugh if my heart weren't breaking. Instead, I simply nodded and began setting the table, wondering how I would make it through dinner pretending that my world hadn't just collapsed around me. Over the next 2 weeks, I lived a double life. On the surface, I maintained our family routine, preparing meals, attending my usual activities, asking about the children's school days. Underneath, I was gathering evidence and making plans. My first test was simple but revealing. Over morning coffee, I casually mentioned to Stephanie, I'm thinking of getting my grandmother's diamond and ruby pendant appraised. The one with the Art Deco setting. Insurance purposes, you know. No such pendant existed in my collection, but Stephanie's eyes lit up briefly before she composed her features. That sounds smart, Mom. Where is it kept? I could take it in for you if you'd like. Oh, I'll handle it, I said vaguely. It's tucked away safely. For the next 3 days, I noticed Stephanie spending unusual amounts of time in my bedroom when she thought I was gardening or out of the house. Twice, I returned unexpectedly to find her emerging from my closet with flimsy excuses about borrowing a sweater or looking for spare hangers. I also discovered she had been photographing the contents of my jewelry box systematically. One evening while she took Emma to soccer practice, I checked her phone that she'd left charging in the kitchen. The photo gallery contained dozens of images of my jewelry pieces, each labeled with notes about potential value. The final confirmation came when I deliberately left for my book club meeting, but doubled back after 10 minutes, entering through the rarely used side door. I moved silently upstairs to find Stephanie in my bedroom, the closet door open, standing on a footstool and running her hands along the top shelf where my safe was partially hidden. Looking for something? I asked from the doorway. She nearly fell off the stool in surprise. Mom, I thought you were at book club. Clearly, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. What are you doing in my closet, Stephanie? Her recovery was impressive, I had to admit. I was looking for that silk scarf you mentioned yesterday. The blue one? I thought it might be stored up here with your seasonal items. I never mentioned a blue scarf, I said quietly. And even if I had, why would you search while I'm not home instead of simply asking me? I wanted to surprise you, she improvised, stepping down from the stool. I thought it would look nice with that outfit you're wearing to Elaine's birthday lunch tomorrow. I didn't push further. I had seen enough. I'll find it later if I need it, I said, stepping aside to let her pass. Weren't you going to start dinner soon? I just came back from my reading glasses. After this incident, The family dynamics grew increasingly strained. Stephanie must have realized I was suspicious, as she recruited the children as unwitting allies. "Grandma seems forgetful lately," I overheard her telling Jason. She accused me of taking things from her room, but then we found them right where she'd left them. "Should we be worried about her?" my grandson asked, genuine concern in his voice. "Let's just keep an eye on her," Stephanie answered. Sometimes at her age, confusion can set in suddenly. The gaslighting campaign had begun. Items I knew had been taken would mysteriously reappear, in obvious places, making me question my own memory. Notes I left for myself were moved or altered. Appointments I recorded on the kitchen calendar would be changed, causing me to miss meetings or arrive on wrong days. Michael, Stephanie's ex-husband, became involved when he came to pick up the children for his weekend visitation. "Margaret, the kids are worried about you," he said awkwardly as they loaded their overnight bags into his car. "Stephanie mentioned you've been confused lately. Is everything okay?" "Everything is fine," I assured him, maintaining my composure. "Just a little family miscommunication. Well, if you need anything," he offered vaguely before driving away with my grandchildren. That evening, I called my friend Beverly Carter, whom I'd known since college and trusted implicitly. "I need to talk," I said simply. "Not on the phone. Can we meet tomorrow?" Beverly lived an hour away but drove to me the next morning. We met at a small cafe 2 towns over, where no one would recognize us. Over coffee, I recounted everything: the overheard conversation, the missing jewelry, the systematic gaslighting campaign. "Margaret, this is elder financial abuse," Beverly said firmly when I finished. She had worked as a social worker before retirement and recognized the patterns immediately. "It's more common than people realize, especially within families." I never thought Stephanie would. I couldn't finish the sentence. Beverly reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "This isn't your fault. But you need to protect yourself legally, and quickly. My son Thomas is an attorney who specializes in elder law. Will you let me call him for you?" I nodded, too emotional to speak. Thomas Reynolds agreed to see me that same afternoon. In his downtown office, surrounded by law books and framed credentials, I felt a strange combination of shame and relief as I explained my situation. "Unfortunately, Mrs. Wilson, what you're describing is a textbook case of family financial exploitation," he confirmed after listening carefully. "The good news is you've caught it relatively early, and you're clearly competent to make your own financial decisions." "What should I do?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed. "First, secure any remaining valuables immediately. Second, document everything that's already missing or been tampered with. Third, check all your financial accounts for unauthorized access or changes." I followed his advice that evening, reviewing my online banking records after Stephanie and the children had gone to bed. What I discovered sent a new wave of shock through me. My password had been changed on 2 accounts within the past month. While no money appeared to be missing yet, Stephanie had added herself as an authorized user on my primary checking account for emergency purposes, according to the bank notes. More disturbing still, I found draft paperwork on the family computer for a durable power of attorney form, already filled out with Stephanie's information as my designated agent. It had not been signed or notarized yet, but the intention was clear. She was positioning herself to take legal control of my affairs. I printed these documents as evidence, then deleted the files from the computer. The next morning, I visited my bank in person, removed Stephanie as an authorized user, changed all passwords, and placed alerts on my accounts for any future changes. That night, I sat alone in my bedroom looking at old photographs. Stephanie's kindergarten graduation, her high school prom, her wedding day with Richard and me beaming beside her. The day Jason was born, with Stephanie proudly placing her firstborn in my arms. Where had that daughter gone? Had financial desperation after her divorce truly transformed her so completely? Or had this capacity for deception always existed beneath the surface, waiting for opportunity? I had no answers, only the painful certainty that I needed to protect myself from the person I had once protected from all harm. The next day, I made an appointment with Thomas Reynolds to create a comprehensive plan. "The most important thing," Thomas Reynolds advised during our next meeting, is to secure your valuables while gathering evidence. Don't confront your daughter until you've protected your assets. I nodded, trying to focus on practical steps, rather than my emotional devastation. I've already changed my banking passwords and removed her access. Good start, he approved. Now let's talk about your jewelry collection. Over the next week, I implemented a careful plan. First, I photographed and cataloged every piece of jewelry I still possessed, creating a detailed inventory with descriptions and any documentation I could find. For pieces I suspected had been tampered with or replaced, I noted my concerns and original descriptions from memory. I scheduled an appointment with Gerald Fraser, a reputable jeweler in a neighboring town who had done appraisals for us years ago. I selected several pieces that appeared suspicious and brought them in a nondescript tote bag rather than my usual jewelry case. "Mrs. Wilson, it's been years," Gerald greeted me warmly. Then, examining the pieces under his jeweler's loupe, his expression grew serious. "I remember appraising some of these items for insurance purposes. May I ask why you're having them reevaluated?" Something in his tone told me he had already spotted discrepancies. "I'm updating my insurance," I said, not yet ready to admit the full truth to an acquaintance. "Are the pieces still in good condition?" Gerald cleared his throat. "Mrs. Wilson, I need to be direct with you. These diamond earrings are not the same ones I appraised in 2015. The settings are similar, but these stones are cubic zirconia, not diamonds. And this gold bracelet has been replaced with gold-plated brass." Though I had suspected as much, having professional confirmation made my stomach clench. "I see. And the emerald ring?" "The emerald has been replaced with green glass. Skillfully done, but definitely not the original stone." I maintained my composure as Gerald documented his findings. With his written assessment in hand, I visited my bank the following day and accessed my safe deposit box. The contents remained secure. My will, property deeds, birth certificates, and several pieces of jewelry I had stored there years ago on Richard's insistence. "Richard, you were right to be cautious," I whispered to his memory as I examined the untouched items. "I just never imagined we needed to be cautious about our own daughter." Next, I consulted with Carl Peterson, the financial advisor who had helped Richard and me plan for retirement. I explained the situation as clinically as I could, focusing on the practical aspects rather than the emotional betrayal. "We need to secure your accounts immediately," Carl agreed, "and review your will and any powers of attorney to ensure they reflect your current wishes." For the next few days, I maintained a facade of normalcy at home while systematically protecting my assets. I opened new accounts at a different bank. I changed the beneficiary designations on my life insurance policy to specify that proceeds would be held in trust for my grandchildren, rather than paid directly to Stephanie. I even installed a small camera in my bedroom, hidden in a bookshelf ornament, after consulting with Thomas about the legality of such monitoring in my own home. The hardest part was pretending nothing had changed while living with Stephanie and the children. Each morning I greeted them with manufactured cheerfulness. Each evening I engaged in dinner conversation while a storm of betrayal and grief raged inside me. I found myself studying my daughter's face across the table, searching for signs of the child I had raised, wondering if genuine love for me remained beneath her schemes. After nearly 2 weeks of preparation, I was ready for the most difficult step. I carefully packed all remaining jewelry from my bedroom and closet safe into a secure travel case. Early on a Tuesday morning while Stephanie was at work and the children at school, I drove to Thomas Reynolds' law office with the case and all documentation I had gathered. "Are you sure about this approach?" Thomas asked as his assistant photographed and inventoried each piece before securing them in the office safe. "We could involve law enforcement at this point. What she's done constitutes theft." I shook my head firmly. "She's still my daughter, and those are still my grandchildren. I want to protect myself without unnecessarily destroying what family we have left." I paused, feeling the weight of my decision. "At least for now." Thomas nodded with understanding. "We'll document and secure everything. Nothing will leave our possession without your explicit, written authorization." That same afternoon, I met with Diane Fletcher, a therapist Beverly had recommended. In her calm office surrounded by plants and soft lighting, I finally allowed myself to fully express the grief I had been containing. "I feel like I'm mourning her while she's still alive," I admitted through tears. The daughter I thought I had doesn't exist anymore. Maybe she never did. Diane offered tissues and compassionate silence before responding. What you're experiencing is a profound attachment injury. The person you trusted most has violated that trust in a fundamental way. It's natural to feel grief, anger, and confusion simultaneously. Will I ever be able to trust her again? I asked, the question that had haunted me for weeks. That depends on many factors, Diane answered carefully. Her willingness to take responsibility, make amends, demonstrate changed behavior over time, and your own capacity for establishing new boundaries while processing this betrayal. Either way, your relationship will be transformed, not restored to what it was before. The distinction was painful but clarifying. Nothing would return us to the mother-daughter relationship I had cherished. Whatever came next would be something new, built from the ashes of what was lost. As I drove home from therapy, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The initial shock had given way to grief, which now yielded to determination. I had protected my assets, gathered evidence, and consulted professionals. I was no longer simply reacting to Stephanie's betrayal, but actively reclaiming my autonomy. The final piece of my strategic response was creating a new will with Thomas's guidance. The document specified that my estate would be held in trust, with Stephanie receiving limited income, but no control over principal assets. My grandchildren would receive their portions upon reaching responsible ages, managed by a professional trustee rather than their mother. This structure protects your intentions while acknowledging family relationships, Thomas explained as I signed the documents. It can always be modified in the future if circumstances change. That evening, I returned home knowing everything was in place. My jewelry was secure, my finances protected, my legal documents updated. All that remained was the confrontation I had been preparing for and dreading in equal measure. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw Stephanie's car already there, earlier than her usual return from work. Through the front window, I could see her pacing in the living room, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing animatedly. Even from a distance, her agitation was evident. She had discovered the empty jewelry box. The reckoning had arrived sooner than I planned. I took a deep breath and entered the house, the weight of weeks of deception and counter-deception heavy on my shoulders. Stephanie ended her phone call abruptly when she saw me. "Mom," she said, her voice strained with barely controlled panic. "Something terrible has happened. Your jewelry is missing. All of it. I've looked everywhere." I set down my purse calmly. "Is it missing, Stephanie? Or did you already sell it?" Her face froze, eyes widening slightly before she composed her features. "What are you talking about?" "I just discovered your jewelry box empty when I was looking for that brooch you mentioned yesterday." "I didn't mention any brooch yesterday," I said quietly. "And we both know what's been happening." "Mom, you're confused." Her voice took on a patronizing tone I'd grown to recognize and despise. "Maybe you moved the jewelry yourself and forgot. You've been a little forgetful lately, remember? Like last week when you couldn't find your garden gloves, but they were in your coat pocket the whole time." "I heard you, Stephanie," I stated flatly. 3 weeks ago in this house. I heard you telling someone to sell her jewelry before she notices. I heard you laugh about how clueless I am. I heard your plans to replace my diamonds with cubic zirconia and access my safe." The blood drained from her face. For several seconds, she seemed unable to form words. Then, predictably, she shifted to denial. "That's ridiculous. You must have dreamed it or misunderstood something completely different." She forced a concerned smile. "Mom, I'm worried about you. Paranoid delusions can be a sign of cognitive decline." "Stop." My voice was quiet but firm. "I have documentation from Gerald Fraser confirming that several pieces have been replaced with fakes. I have your browser history showing jewelry buyer websites. I have photographs you took of my collection with value notes. And I have the emails you sent to Victor Lawrence offering to sell my mother's pearls." Each piece of evidence landed like a physical blow. Stephanie sank onto the sofa, her strategy of denial crumbling. "Where is my jewelry now?" she finally asked, her voice small. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere you can't access it." She looked up, anger replacing shock. You went through my private emails? My browser history? You invaded my privacy while accusing me of… What exactly? Theft, I supplied. Exploitation. Betrayal. Each word hurt to say aloud, making the reality more concrete. That's not fair. Stephanie's voice rose. Everything I've done was for this family. Do you have any idea what Michael left me with after the divorce? Debt, Mom. Mountains of debt that he hid from me for years. The kids need braces, college tuition, clothes for school. What was I supposed to do? Ask for help. I answered simply. Talk to me honestly about your financial situation. I would have helped you, Stephanie. I have helped you. But instead, you chose to steal from me and gaslight me when I noticed. It's not stealing when it's family, she insisted, a flush spreading across her face. All of this would have been mine eventually anyway. I'm your only child. I just needed it sooner rather than later. The entitled logic stunned me into momentary silence. When I found my voice again, it came out steadier than I expected. Nothing is yours until I'm dead, Stephanie. And even then, only what I choose to leave you. That's how inheritance works. It's not an advance you can take whenever financial troubles hit. So that's it? You're just going to let your only daughter and grandchildren struggle, while you hoard jewelry you never even wear. Her tone turned bitter. Michael's here, I said, hearing a car pull into the driveway. I asked him to come over with the kids. We need to have a family meeting. You involved Michael in this? Stephanie stood up, panic returning to her eyes. And the children? Mom, how could you? They deserve to know what's happening in their home, I said, moving to open the front door. The next hour was among the most painful of my life. We gathered in the living room. Myself, Stephanie, Michael, Jason, and Emma. I explained as gently as possible what had occurred, focusing on facts rather than emotions. Grandma, is it true? Emma asked, tears welling in her eyes. Did Mom really take your jewelry? I nodded, my heart breaking at her distress. Yes, sweetheart. Some pieces are gone forever. Others were replaced with fakes. But why? Jason turned to his mother, confusion and disappointment evident on his young face. Stephanie, cornered by truth, finally broke down. Because we needed money. Because your father left us with nothing. She turned accusingly to Michael. The credit card debt, the second mortgage he never told me about, the tax liens. Do you have any idea what I've been dealing with? Michael looked genuinely shocked. Stephanie, I told you about the credit cards before the divorce was final. And there was never a second mortgage. What are you talking about? The conversation spiraled as years of financial secrets unraveled. It became clear that Stephanie had hidden financial problems from everyone, creating a web of deception that extended far beyond the jewelry theft. She had maxed out credit cards in her name, taken payday loans, and even borrowed money from friends using elaborate lies about temporary hardships. Why didn't you just tell me the truth? I asked when the financial confessions subsided. I would have helped you find legitimate solutions. Because I was ashamed. Stephanie shouted, tears streaming down her face. Because I'm 52 years old and had to move back in with my mother. Because I failed at my marriage, at managing money, at everything. Her raw pain was real, even if it didn't justify her actions. For the first time since discovering her betrayal, I felt a flicker of compassion beneath my hurt. We have two choices now, I said after a moment of heavy silence. We can pursue this legally, with all the consequences that would entail. Or we can find a family solution with strict boundaries and accountability. What kind of family solution? Michael asked cautiously. Stephanie returns whatever original pieces she still has. She provides a complete accounting of what's been sold and to whom. She agrees to financial counseling and complete transparency about her situation. And she accepts that trust has been broken and will take time to rebuild, if it ever can be. And if I refuse? Stephanie asked, though her defeated tone suggested she already knew the answer. Then I file a police report today, and the evidence goes to the district attorney, I said firmly. I don't want to do that, Stephanie. But I will if necessary. The silence that followed was profound. Finally, Stephanie nodded. I'll do whatever you ask. But most of the pieces are already gone. I can't get them back. The admission hurt more than I was prepared for. Family treasures, irreplaceable mementos of my life with Richard and connections to my parents and grandparents, gone forever. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. There's one more thing, I continued. This living arrangement isn't working anymore. You and the children need to find another place to live.
Mom, no, Stephanie pleaded.
Where would we go? How would we afford it? You can stay with me temporarily, Michael offered unexpectedly. I have the space and it would give everyone time to figure out next steps. Emma began to cry in earnest now. But I like living with Grandma. This isn't fair. No, it isn't fair, I agreed, moving to hug her. None of this is fair, sweetheart. But sometimes when trust is broken, people need space apart to heal. As the painful conversation continued into the evening, arrangements were made for Stephanie and the children to move to Michael's house the following weekend. I would help financially with their transition but insisted the money go through Michael to ensure proper use. Stephanie agreed to provide a full accounting of everything she had taken and committed to counseling for what she finally acknowledged was a serious problem. When Michael and the children left, Stephanie and I sat in silence for several minutes. The house felt empty already, the future uncertain. I really am sorry, Mom, she finally said, her voice small and genuine for the first time in months. I don't expect you to believe me or forgive me, but I need you to know that. I looked at my daughter, this person both intimately familiar and completely foreign to me now. I believe you're sorry you got caught, I said honestly. I hope someday you'll be sorry for the actual choices you made and the trust you broke. She nodded, tears falling again. Will we ever be okay again? I wished I could offer the comfort she sought, but false hope would serve neither of us. I don't know, Stephanie. That depends on choices you haven't made yet. And healing I haven't begun. We went to our separate bedrooms then. The distance between us measured not in footsteps but in shattered trust and uncertain redemption. In the quiet of my room, I finally allowed myself to weep freely for all that had been lost. The jewelry that connected me to my past, the daughter I thought I knew, and the unquestioning love that would never return in quite the same way. 6 months can change everything and nothing at all. As summer turned to fall and winter approached, I established new routines in a house that echoed with absence. I had grown accustomed to the quiet again, finding solace in small pleasures. Morning coffee on the porch, evening reading by the fireplace, weekly dinners with old friends I had neglected during Stephanie's stay. The physical wounds of betrayal had largely healed. Through Michael's diligent efforts, some of my jewelry had been recovered from local pawn shops and online buyers. Most pieces were gone forever, including my mother's pearl necklace and several of Richard's most meaningful gifts. I kept the recovered items in my bank's safe deposit box now, along with those that had never been taken. My bedroom jewelry box held only costume pieces of no particular value. The emotional wounds proved more stubborn. On Diane Fletcher's recommendation, I joined a support group for older adults who had experienced family financial exploitation. There I met Judith Foster, a 73-year-old widow whose son had systematically drained her retirement accounts. Our shared experiences forged a friendship that brought unexpected comfort to both our lives. The hardest part isn't the money or the possessions, Judith observed during one of our regular coffee dates. It's the stolen sense of safety within your own family. And the constant second-guessing, I added. Was there something I could have seen sooner? Done differently? Judith squeezed my hand. That kind of thinking leads nowhere useful, Margaret. We trusted because that's what family should be able to do. The failure was theirs, not ours. Her words helped, even when I couldn't fully believe them. I found myself gradually reconnecting with old friends and activities I had abandoned during Stephanie's residence. I rejoined the community garden committee. I increased my volunteer hours at the library. I took a watercolor class at the senior center, discovering a latent artistic talent that surprised and delighted me. Stephanie and I maintained limited contact, primarily through carefully worded text messages and occasional supervised visits with the grandchildren. She had followed through on financial counseling and was working with a therapist to address the deeper issues that had led to her behavior. Michael reported that she was making genuine efforts to rebuild her life honestly, working extra hours at a new dental office job, and adhering to a strict budget. 3 months after moving out, Stephanie left a small package in my mailbox. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet I had never seen before, along with a note. This isn't a replacement for what I took from you. Nothing could be. But I wanted you to have something new, bought with honestly earned money, to mark the beginning of whatever comes next for us. With love and deepest regrets, Stephanie. I wore the bracelet to our next supervised visit, a Sunday afternoon at the park with Jason and Emma. Stephanie noticed immediately but said nothing, her eyes filling with tears that she quickly blinked away. It was a small moment of acknowledgement between us, neither forgiveness nor reconciliation, but perhaps a tiny step toward something new. The grandchildren adjusted better than I feared. Jason, with the resilience of youth, adapted quickly to living with his father. Emma struggled more, missing our daily routines and comfortable conversations. I made special time for each of them individually, careful to never speak ill of their mother, while also not dismissing the reality of what had happened. "Grandma," Emma asked during one of our private lunches, "do you hate Mom now?"
No, sweetheart, I answered truthfully.
"I'm deeply hurt by what she did, and I don't trust her the way I once did, but I don't hate her. She's still your mother, and she's still my daughter. But you don't love her the same anymore," Emma persisted with teenage directness. I considered my answer carefully. Love changes as we experience life together, Emma. Sometimes it grows stronger through challenges. Sometimes it has to adapt to painful new realities. But it doesn't disappear completely, even when we're deeply disappointed. She seemed satisfied with this response, and I was grateful for her wisdom beyond her years. Both grandchildren were seeing a counselor to process the family disruption, which I supported financially despite Stephanie's initial resistance to the idea. As Christmas approached, I faced decisions about holiday arrangements. After consultation with Thomas Reynolds and much personal reflection, I invited Stephanie and the children for Christmas Eve dinner, with Michael joining us for dessert afterward. The invitation came with clear boundaries. A 3-hour visit, no gifts of significant value in either direction, and a mutual agreement to focus on rebuilding, rather than revisiting past hurt. Stephanie accepted with evident relief. "Thank you, Mom. This means more than I can say." The evening itself was neither the comfortable family gathering of past years, nor the tense confrontation I had feared. We moved cautiously around each other, finding moments of genuine connection amid the awkward pauses. Emma played carols on the piano as she had each Christmas since beginning lessons at age 8. Jason helped me serve the traditional beef Wellington that Richard had always insisted made a proper holiday meal. Stephanie brought a photo album of childhood Christmases that we paged through together, laughing at forgotten moments captured on film. When they left that night, Stephanie lingered in the doorway after the others had gone to the car. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said simply. "Not just for what I did but for who I became. I'm working to be someone different now." I nodded, not quite ready to offer the absolution she sought but acknowledging the effort. "That's all any of us can do, Stephanie. Keep working toward who we want to become." As winter yielded to spring, I continued my own work of healing and redefinition. I divided my jewelry collection, keeping some pieces in safekeeping for Emma when she was older, donating others to a women's shelter fundraiser, and wearing a select few that no longer triggered painful memories. My relationship with Stephanie remained a work in progress, tentative and carefully boundaried. Trust, once broken, rebuilds itself brick by brick through consistent actions over time. She was laying those bricks steadily, if slowly. Whether they would ever form the same strong structure remained uncertain, but I had come to accept that uncertainty as part of our new reality. What I knew with certainty was this: I had survived. Not just the betrayal itself, but the shattering of illusions that accompanied it. I was stronger than I had believed possible, more resilient than circumstances had previously required me to be. The jewelry Stephanie had taken represented precious memories, but those memories lived within me independent of physical tokens. No one could steal the life I had shared with Richard, the joy of raising Stephanie in happier times, or my capacity to find new purpose as I moved forward. One warm April afternoon, I sat in my garden surrounded by the first blooms of spring. The daffodils Richard had planted decades ago still faithfully pushed through the soil each year, a testament to endurance and renewal. As I watched a hummingbird dart among the flowers, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for many months. Family relationships, I had learned, are neither guaranteed nor unconditional. They require tending like garden plants, vulnerable to neglect or harm, capable of withering or thriving depending on the care invested. Mine had weathered a severe storm, roots exposed and branches broken. Whether new growth would ultimately strengthen or further damage the core remained to be seen. But like the garden surrounding me, there was always potential for beauty to emerge from even the most difficult seasons. Have you ever had to rebuild trust with someone you love after a painful betrayal? It's one of life's most challenging journeys. If my story resonated with you, please share your experiences in the comments below. Remember to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more stories about family, healing, and finding strength in difficult times. And if you know someone who might be facing similar challenges with family trust, please share this video with them. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find wisdom and peace in your own family relationships.